Good evening, and welcome back to Whispers at Night. Tonight, we cross the rusted gates of the graveyard after dark, where 7 true encounters reveal why the dead aren't always the only ones who linger. These are not urban legends or whisper chain myths. They come from groundskeepers, grave diggers, night security, and mourners who witnessed what should not move among the stones. Each account is supported by incident logs, police reports, and first-hand testimony, sketching a chilling portrait of cemeteries that refuse to sleep. What you're about to hear presses against that fragile veil between remembrance and the unknown, and shows how easily the quiet of consecrated ground can turn on you. If you're new here, subscribe to Whispers at Night for true horror stories every night, and tap the bell so you never miss the shadows we illuminate. Now step softly between the markers, where names fade, earth settles, and something old watches without blinking. Enter, if you dare. I was 17 and restless in Briar Ferry, a river town tucked into the folds of the Blue Ridge. Fog slept under the bridges, and the paper mill perfumed everything like wet cardboard. My summer rhythm barely changed. Mornings at Ridge Hardware, cheap tacos by the boat ramp, and long nights orbiting the same 3 parking lots until someone said the magic words, "Let's go somewhere we shouldn't." There were 4 of us. Sol swore his tiny YouTube channel would someday make our dead-end town blink. Tamsin had the car, a scarred Corolla with a ceiling patched in duct tape and a gas pedal that stuck if you stomped. Eva went quiet when fun looked like a cliff. I was Lark, the one who laughed too fast when things weren't actually funny. Saul had been begging all July. "No more culverts," he said, scrolling past tunnels that led to more tunnels. "I need a story that breathes on the lens." He found it in a county survey and a forum where usernames flaked like old paint. Carrion Grove Cemetery, left to sink into weeds after the last groundskeeper died. Corn hemmed 2 sides. A row of black pines guarded the others. The county chained the main gate and forgot it. We met at the 24-hour fuel mart by the interstate at 11:03 p.m., where the lights washed everything one shade too pale. Tamsin topped the tank while Saul filmed it like cinema. Evo stirred powdered creamer into coffee and watched hot dogs rotate as if they might give testimony. I bought breath mints and a can of neon caffeine that tasted like melted candy. We drove out feeling official and ridiculous. The farm track rattled our teeth. We passed the fairground, the water tower with a peeling cartoon otter, then barns slumped like tired animals. The moon was almost full, bright enough to pull shallow shadows from the grass. We rolled past the chained gate and along the fence until the wire bowed like a shrug. The gap was person-sized. We made ourselves smaller anyway and slipped through. Inside, the air had that cemetery mixture of hush and neglect. Headstones leaned like tired teeth. Angels wore moss where fingers should be. A stone lamb had been sanded to a blank nub by rain. The ground rippled where roots had lifted it, soft swells that made walking feel like stepping over sleeping animals. Names sounded like canned goods. Wentworth, Halper, Tolly. Dates emptied my chest. 1846, 1891, 1903. We tried to be solemn for 5 minutes. Then we did what kids do when silence got big around us. We made noise. Tamsin read inscriptions in exaggerated voices. Tobacco baron, stern schoolmarm, man who said he was a banker and probably wasn't. Saul filmed everything, moving the phone on his stabilizer like it was writing our dare across the dark. Evo laughed in rationed pieces, then stopped, the way you cancel your own echo. Carrion Grove sloped into a shallow bowl where the fog collected and the headstones leaned harder. That's where we found the mausoleum, half swallowed by the hill, 12 feet across maybe. Limestone blocks weathered to the color of old teeth. An iron door with a chain drooped through the handle. The padlock had long ago given up. The door sat open 2 inches, too narrow for a person, perfect for a phone. "We're not going in," Saul said, hands raised like a surgeon. Nobody wanted to. He slid his phone into the gap, light first, and we crowded the screen. Inside was a box that had forgotten its purpose. Stone shelves bare as ribs, dry leaves that had slipped in and never left. A rectangle on the dusty floor where a coffin must have rested once. Beer cans, a melted candle, air like a closed book. No bones, no dramatic second door, just old emptiness, patient and indifferent. While Saul narrated, Ivo kept turning his head in careful increments, as if he'd tuned a seconds station in his skull. "Do you hear that?" he asked. We climbed toward the front where sodium light from the county road spilled pale over the fence. Saul wanted his poster pan, his favorite trick. Stage your people at 3 markers, then glide backwards slow enough to look intentional. He positioned us with the seriousness he saved for things that scared him. Lark, that tall obelisk. Tamsin, sit on the stone book. Ivo, by the fence, faces like the ground is whispering. I leaned on a granite pillar carved Wentworth. The stone kept a bit of the day's heat like an animal. Tamsin perched on the book, careful with her feet. Ivo set his palm on the iron as if checking for a pulse. Saul panned, voice settling into the showman hush that always made strangers watch 10 seconds longer than they meant to. We left at 12:28 a.m. because Saul loved a timestamp as if it could tie our luck down. We squeezed back through the wire and loped to the car. In the Corolla, Saul replayed favorites and mumbled about titles. I stared into the passenger mirror more than I should have, shrinking the road behind us to a confident ribbon. Saturday returned like nothing had teeth. Ridge Hardware sold screws to people guessing lengths. Tamsin ferried her little brothers to soccer. Ivo disappeared into online chess. Saul texted our group at lunch. "This cut is wild." I replied with a skull emoji and pretended my stomach didn't do a small, stupid flip. Sunday evening, Saul called. He never called. "Come over," he said. The please was implied by what he left out. His room glowed with LED strips and secondhand trophies. The serious desk had more editing hours than homework. Tamsin and Ivo sat on the bed like birds ready for 2 different flights. Saul didn't do hello. He tapped spacebar. The clip was from the start. Us slipping through the fence like coins through a counting machine. Saul froze the frame. "There," he said. 15 feet behind us between 2 leaning stones, someone stood. Not blur, not fog making a trick. A person height shape in a dark jacket and jeans. Still, angled toward us. The image was soft at the edges, the way night makes everything gentle. But it refused to be nothing. Saul rewound and replayed until my brain tried to invent a different answer. Then he cut to the mausoleum shot. While his hand held the phone in the gap, the same jacket slid between markers further back, shifting position when the lens drifted near, disappearing at the exact moment a clean angle would have caught him. Saul had spent all day combing frames. He found the figure at least a dozen times across both cameras, his phone and the chest-mounted GoPro that made even good choices look guilty. Never the foreground, always arranged in relation to where our eyes were pointed. In the poster pan, the figure surfaced behind each of us as Saul's sweep passed. My turn, a shoulder rising, then sinking as the camera moved on. Tamsin's, a sliver of torso where a stone angel's wing cut the view. Ivo's, the outline of a head beyond the fence posts, still as fog. In one goofy clip where Tamsin rose from behind a low marker like a zombie, the man took position directly on the other side of where she crouched. If she had leaned backward instead of forward, she would have touched him. "Here," Saul whispered, and showed me the frame that still climbs my spine. I was holding the GoPro, mouth running about roots lifting ground like knuckles. 10 feet behind me, maybe less, the man stood beside a pillar with a cracked urn, jacket, jeans, a cap maybe, or hair slicked flat. He wasn't watching Saul. He was looking at my back with the kind of patience that sands stone. Saul tried to punch in. The face dissolved into squares you couldn't name. Ivo leaned close until his breath fogged the screen, then jerked back like an edge had surprised him. "What do we do?" I asked, meaning a list, a spell, a manual. "Police," Tamsin said, because someone had to step on the thin ice of adulthood. "And tell them we were trespassing?" Saul asked. The word sat between us like a stump no one wanted to move. We didn't call yet. For a while we just watched. The man moved like practice, always adjusting to stay in the negative space of our attention. He knew where the lenses were. He kept stone between himself and our sight. He let the camera do the looking for us. Tamsin cleared her throat. "When we got back to my car," she said, "the rear view was wrong. Turned," she said, and showed the motion with 2 fingers. Small, deliberate. I thought Saul hit it getting in. "I got in on the other side," Saul said. We replayed the last clip before we left. As we walked toward the fence, the figure mirrored our speed, stopping when we hesitated, hiding when Saul's angle would have caught him clean. Right before the phone dipped, the man stepped toward the gap as if he meant to arrive with us. We made stupid promises. We won't post. We'll tell our parents if anything else. We'll call the police if the world provides a cleaner sentence. We went home unsettled, like the night had reached into our pockets and kept a coin. For 6 days nothing happened, or nothing that consented to be proof. We slept badly, worked, sent memes, acted like versions of ourselves we remembered. Then Tamsin texted, "Come now." In her driveway, she held a receipt like it was made of heat. Fuel Mart. Our Fuel Mart. Time-stamped 11:46 p.m. the night we went to Carrion Grove. 2 items, coffee and a disposable phone charger. Cash. She'd found it wedged under the passenger seat. "I didn't buy this," she said. "My charger lives in the console, and their coffee tastes like a dare." Saul opened the arrival clip on his laptop. At the far edge of the frame, high and halogen bright, a pair of headlights crested the farm road, and blinked out as we turned onto the track. We'd called it a turnaround at the time. With the receipt in Tamsin's fingers, it looked like someone lowering their eyes. We filed a report because adulthood expects it. The officer watched the clips and asked careful questions. He took a copy on a thumb drive and slid it into a manila folder that already had other names. He didn't say we were stupid. He didn't say we were brave. He said, "We'll look into it," in a tone that meant he might, and that might not matter. We kept the footage. We didn't post it. People who hear that say we wasted our proof, but proof isn't a cure. The lens was the thing he used to exist for us at all. Posting felt like sending him a link he'd already subscribed to. Sometimes I replay something small, not the obvious frames, not the one where he stands 10 feet behind me, not the way he rises and sinks behind each of us like a tide that prefers stone. I play the second when light washes the mausoleum floor and the dust shows prints. Not crisp, not deep, just those shallow impressions you make by standing a long time and shifting your weight, like patience leaving fingerprints. By September, the math of our futures changed. Ivo applied to a college 2 states away for their forestry program, which may have been true, and also not the point. Tamsin put a mini baseball bat in the trunk and laughed at herself. Saul bought an external drive and made 3 backups, then slid one into his dad's gun safe and didn't tell us the code. I tried sleeping with my phone face down like that would keep it from seeing me first. Sometimes I stand in line at the Fuel Mart at 11:40 p.m., and a man in a windbreaker buys coffee and a disposable charger. I remind myself he is not a story, just a person with a shift or a drive or a habit, and also that the person who threaded our night might be somewhere else, practice. And the same angles, perfecting the trick of being seen only later. We say we learned practical things. Don't trespass. If you do, shut up. Check your mirrors before you get in. If one looks wrong, believe it. What I really learned is heavier and less helpful. The dead keep their lanes. The living sometimes practice negative space until they become it. The camera is not a shield. It is an invitation that keeps inviting after you've closed the app. We never went back to Carrion Grove. We say it like an oath and mean it the way you mean a promise you want to keep. When river fog pools in low places and the mill breathes over town, I hear Saul's intro in the version he wrote but never recorded. Soft like the first word you use to wake someone without breaking them. Carrion Grove, he would have said. Old ground. 4 friends. 1 more if you count the lens. I don't count the lens anymore. I count locks. I count steps to the car. I count the beats between catching a shape in glass and deciding it's only mine. On good nights, that's enough. On others, I feel watched from the corner of the frame, patient, certain, and I imagine the small sound a chain makes when a door opens just enough for a phone to slip through and tell me the truth I wouldn't look at when it could have helped. If he wanted applause, he chose wrong. If he wanted witnesses, the lens kept inviting him back at night. Rain pushed in around 4, a steady whisper that turned our cemetery into an aquarium. I was on the east fence at Willow Ridge Memorial Park, wrenching a stubborn hinge into obedience, and the first real sheet hit so hard the oaks blurred. 6 years here, and I've learned storms give the place a different gravity. Sound deadens. Colors flatten. The world narrows to breath, metal, and the names I keep readable. My wife, Anika, knows Mondays run long. My partner, Rafi, usually covers half the late rounds, but he texted at dawn that a fever had put him on his back. So I had the whole 40 acres to walk before I could lock the gates by 6. If I didn't beat the river road home, I'd need a boat. 6:30, with the sky smudged and the rain finding ways into my collar, I cut across the oldest section, slanted markers, lichen, stones gnawed to sugar, and froze. Someone was moving through the rows like a librarian pulling books, methodical, unhurried, pausing to consider. People lose time here. We shoo them out gently all the time. This didn't feel like that. No umbrella. Long dark coat soaked to its bones, head bare to the weather as if it had nothing to say to him. I angled my flashlight low and slogged toward him. Mud tried to steal my boots. "Hey there," I called, polite but firm. "We're closed. I need to lock up." He stood facing a mid-century headstone and only turned when I was near enough to see the rain polish his face to porcelain. Early 40s, clean-shaven, hair carved into a precise part by the downpour, and a thin moon-shaped scar running from his temple to his cheek. His eyes were pale gray and very calm. "I know," he said. "I had to wait until you finished with the Baker plot." The words put ice down my back. I'd refitted the Baker's brass ring and clipped their hedges an hour earlier. No one had been around. "You always do the Bakers on Mondays, we? And Rafi's here," he continued, conversational. "But since he's sick, you squeeze them in before dark." "You'll need to leave, sir," I said, keeping my posture neutral. "Schedules and visitors aren't public." He tilted his head. "Annika's making spinach lasagna," he said. "She does that when you work late because it reheats well." I gripped the flashlight harder. Maybe he knew someone in town. Maybe he watched me too closely. None of that fit the clean accuracy of his tone. "Who are you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He drifted along the stones, trailing his fingers without looking at names. "You'll stop at Harbor Pump on Bayview," he said. "The neon sign flickers. E goes dark every third blink. You'll buy the green crossword scratcher like you do when Rafi calls out. It'll hit for 20. You'll fold it into your wallet and forget it until Friday." I slid my phone out, thumb already hovering to call dispatch. He said, "Battery at 12%, as if we were discussing rain gauges. "You forgot to charge last night. You stayed up with that documentary about the man who made wind chimes out of bones. Annika fell asleep at 11:13. I looked. 11%. Close enough to make my chest lock. He stopped inches from the light's beam, rain beating on his lashes without falling. "There's a photo behind your license," he said softly. "Not of Annika. Mirren. 3 years. A highway, a curve, A bad minute. You don't keep it for romance. You keep it because you couldn't throw it away the day you tried. My hand was already on my wallet, feeling the familiar square. The corners of that picture are soft as felt. I need you to leave, I said again. It came out thin. Your mother calls Sundays at 7:30, he went on, patient. You let it ring sometimes because she asks about children and you don't want to say the treatments keep failing. I started edging toward the maintenance office, a steel-sided cube with a landline and a door that hates being a door. He watched me like a cat humoring a moth. The shed sticks, he called. Lift and pull. You've been promising to fix it since June. I ran. Protocol broke like wet chalk. Rain came at me sideways. I cut behind the angel with the cracked wing, sprinted past the Davenport obelisk, and he said, very gently, "Root." My boot caught the exact root I always forget, and I slammed my knee against stone. A hot line shot up my thigh. I staggered, kept going. The truck waited under the yellow wash of the security light like a patient animal. I fought with the key fob, tumbled inside, hit the locks. The windshield turned the world into watercolor. He was 20 feet out, rain making him a moving sketch. He lifted a hand, 3 fingers, 2, 1. On one, the engine died like someone had pinched a vein. I twisted the key, nothing but a cough. He stepped to my window and didn't peer in. He placed his palm flat on the glass. "Alternator," he said, clear through the rain. "You've heard the whine 3 weeks. You moved your appointment to next Saturday when Rafi asked you to cover a morning." He was right, of course. The handprint bloomed on the fog. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I came to remind you of scale. Someone is always watching. Someone knows the order you put your keys down and which one you drop when you're nervous. You'll go home. You'll hold Anika. You won't tell her about me. You'll fix the truck. You'll come back and keep the names legible, because if you don't..." He didn't finish. He took his hand away. The print stayed as perfect as a pressed leaf. He walked into the headstones and became rain again. I turned the key. The truck started like a bad story someone else had told. I drove to Harbor Pump because I needed to see if the world would keep behaving. I bought the green crossword, scraped it in the cab with the edge of my house key, and there it was, $20. I folded it into my wallet. The coffee tasted like nickels. At home, the windows were fogged. Lasagna breathed garlic into the kitchen. Annika turned with a smile that made my throat hurt. I hugged her too long. "You okay?" she asked. "Long shift," I said. She let the lie sit where it wouldn't bruise us. 8 months passed like a slow wave. I still lock the gates most nights. I haven't seen him again, but the cemetery feels annotated. A fresh chrysanthemum on a grave I'd just scrubbed. A damp footprint near the columbarium that dried long after the others. The brass ring on the Baker vault turned 90 degrees with no wind. I pulled old logs. I begged for footage from the shops behind our fence. Headlights smeared. Cats did crimes. No man with a moon-shaped scar and a voice like a ruler. I hired a private investigator and paid for a report that read like weather. Conditions existed. Nothing conclusive. Sometimes I wake at 3 and listen, not for thunder, but for a countdown I can't decide I want to hear. I moved my wallet into a desk drawer under warranty booklets and keys that don't fit anything we own. I don't take out Mirren's picture, but I know by the feel that it's thinning. Late May, thunder stitched itself to the horizon. I stood at the gates at closing and watched a young couple finish their quiet. When they left, I locked up and took the long path back. The Baker vault was ordinary again. Someone had tucked a folded paper towel under the base like a shim. Expecting ants, I pinched it out. Inside sat a dry, unscratched green crossword ticket. On the back, in neat block letters, "You'll stop checking when you're ready, JJ. My name is Jules. At work, people call me Jay." I hadn't told him that. I put the ticket in the desk with the old keys and shut the drawer. I haven't scratched it. I replaced the alternator. I planed the shed door until it stopped sulking. I labeled shelves, on. Sundays, I answer my mother and tell her we're on the path we're on. Sometimes she lets that be. When she doesn't, I think of a hand on glass, a paused sentence, and my patience stretches. You might think I fear the weather now. I don't. The weather tells you what it is. I fear exactness, the way knowing empties choice. I also fear losing it, the idea that one day no one will be looking at me hard enough to say what I'll do next. So I change my habits. I reverse my rounds, take the back road, buy a different coffee, give strangers 3 routes instead of 1. My knee aches where it kissed granite. I rub it like a talisman. Tonight the forecast is ugly. I'll lock the gates at 6. I'll check the baker's first, just to break the rhythm he wrote for me. I'll walk the rows with my light carving a tunnel through the rain and glance at the spaces between stones where the dark looks a shade heavier. If someone steps out and says my name, I'll decide again how much of my life belongs to me. There are still flowers where I just weeded. There are footprints that point the wrong way. There are pauses that feel shaped like words. Somewhere, a man with a thin moon scar and a tide's patience is choosing a corner. He kept his promise. I've kept mine. We are tethered to a sentence he left hanging. I am a caretaker. I lock and unlock. I keep the names readable. I let the rain do its small work. And on nights when the storm presses its chest to the stones, my flashlight cuts a strip of day through the dark. Sometimes, beyond that pale strip, I see a hand raise 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. I tell myself I won't wait for the last finger to fold. Then I do, listening to the rain count for us both, and I can't tell whether the patience humming in my ribs is mine or borrowed for a little while. I didn't plan to become the night heartbeat of a graveyard. I needed rent, not revelations. 8 months ago, after the last client stiffed my renovation crew and the bank ate my truck, I took a job nobody else wanted. Overnight security at Cemeteries Cemetery on the edge of Brackenridge. The listing sounded sturdy, night watch grounds. But really it's me, a golf cart with a whining belt, and a grid of brand new LED motion lights the city bragged about on a ribbon-cutting live stream. My shift runs 10 to 6. Most nights I sit in a square office by an iron gate, drink bad coffee, and let streaming shows hiss in my pocket until the map blips. The lights are the whole system. Each path has a passive infrared sensor that sniffs for heat and movement. Trip 1, and a flood of white washes the gravel bright as a clinic. The monitor by my desk shows a map, a rectangle carved into labeled sections, A through M. If something moves, a little square glows. It's supposed to help me spot vandals or mourners who stay past sunset. Mostly it helps me count how often raccoons forget their geniuses. Tuesday nights, the map does something a raccoon can't. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Section H wakes like a choreographed ghost. First, the light beside the maintenance shed detonates white. 30 feet along, the next lamp follows, then the next, measured strides down a corridor no one walks anymore. 3 minutes later, the last lamp flares over a modest headstone by the back chain link. Then everything goes dark, tidy as a hand smoothing a sheet. The first time it happened, I thought, dear. The third Tuesday, I started a log. I wrote the time, the order, the duration. 3 minutes 15 to 20 seconds. I noted temperature, wind, moon phase, things you write when you're embarrassed to admit you're watching for a pattern. The cameras, decent domes with night vision, showed nothing being gone. Ute light and the shadows of angels and cedars. No figure, no fog, just an empty path that refused to be empty. On the 5th Tuesday, I parked the cart, slipped behind a tall monument, and watched. At 2:47, the first lamp ignited by the shed, then another 30 feet closer to me, then another, a lamp lung breathing toward the back fence. The air felt ordinary. Gravel made its old, honest crunch when I shifted my weight. Something crossed that lane at human pace and left me no sound, no shape, nothing to scold. Section H is older ground. Teachers, machinists, grandmothers in church hats. I pulled files from the office cabinet that sticks when it rains. The sequence always ended at a granite marker the color of rainwater. Elodie Crane, 1944 to 1973. Beneath the name, the family bought 6 words. Our brightest light. Walk home. Simple stone, no photo, no angels. If not for the lamps, I would have shelved her beside the rest of the quiet. The obituary in our records said little. 29. Worked evenings at Rook Mercer Textile. Died unexpectedly. Parents, 2 brothers. I couldn't stop staring at the year, 1973, until my next day off. The Brackenridge Library smells like floor polish and penciled marginalia. Marla at the front desk has been there since mixtapes. She showed me the microfilm reader and let me roll through November like flipping cards. Elodie's face appeared in a soft studio portrait. Hair in a practical sweep. Expression like somebody about to laugh. The article below it made the bottom of my stomach cold. She left the mill early that Tuesday. Wasn't feeling right, co-workers said, and took her normal route. Down Mill Pike, across the culvert, then along Threadneedle Lane, the road that used to track the cemetery's back boundary before the town expanded the grounds. At 2:47 a.m., a dark sedan struck her and didn't stop. Pronounced dead at the scene, no sussed, pecked, no plate. That time sat on the page like a thumbprint. Marla brought me maps. In the first, Threadneedle ran behind where Section H sits now, and Mill Pike cut past a blank rectangle where the maintenance shed would one day stand. In the second, dated 1976, Threadneedle was rerouted and the cemetery swallowed the old lane. Back in the office, I layered the maps in my head over the monitor's grid. The lights that marched every Tuesday traced the bones of Threadneedle, shed to fence, lamp to lamp, a vanished road pacing itself in LEDs. I brought the notebook to my supervisor because superstition is cheaper when someone else says it aloud. Klein wears a reflective vest like a personality and says liability like a prayer. He paged through my notes, scratched his jaw, and said, "Ground temperature can do funny things. Piping under there, maybe. Thermal plumes." When I asked why thermal plumes walked at the speed of a tired human, he told me not to get poetic on company time. By then, I'd begun noticing the air. At 2:45 on Tuesdays, Section H goes thin, like pressure before a storm. The radio hisses. My phone loses signal. The cart's meter dips into a sulk. It isn't dramatic. It's insistence. The sky stays clear. I checked 6 months of weather, not one Tuesday with rain during my shift. As if whatever this is needs the air set the way a stage needs flats and ropes. I wanted a person, not conditions. In city records, I found a fiancé, Nathan Loom. He moved away within a year of Elodie's death. Her brothers, Rhett and Jonah, were gone now, but Jonah had a son living 2 hours east, which is close when your questions make sleep small. Theo Crane answered after the 4th ring. When I said Elodie's name, the line loosened. He told me Aunt Elodie folded her bus fare into the same corner of the same wallet every night, shoes lined heel to heel on the mat. She believed routine kept life attached to you, he said. On the night she'd she'd clocked out 15 minutes early. He sounded like someone stepping carefully around glass. His father used to claim he saw her sometimes, years after, while taking the trash out late Tuesdays. Not a face, just a woman-shaped certainty slipping past the hedgerow along the line she used to walk. He moved apartments the next spring. He never chose a place on Threadneedle's old course again. 2 Tuesdays later, I waited at Elodie's stone at 2:45 and promised myself not to be foolish. When the first lamp snapped awake by the shed, I stepped backward at the same deliberate pace the lights use, keeping ahead of each surge, matching a ghost's stride with mine. The air cooled with each pool of brightness. When the final lamp bathed the stone, I saw something that hadn't been there at midnight. Flowers. Not a florist's triangle. Roadside flowers. Chicory, yarrow, Queen Anne's lace. damp stems dusted like they'd just come from a ditch. I asked the grounds crew the next morning. Nobody claimed them. "We don't place what we don't bill," Klein said, and looked past me at paperwork. The next week I borrowed a thermal imager from my cousin who inspects drafts. If the sensors were seeing heat, maybe I could catch a trace. At 2:47, the first fixture woke and the screen stayed blue cold. When the second lamp triggered, a soft distortion appeared, like air bent around something gently warming. Not a hot human outline, more a traveling absence making room for itself. It eased forward at human pace. At the stone, the shape deepened, the way breath does in January, then thinned to nothing as the last lamp died. I should have been satisfied. Instead, I became cruel to the past. I dug deeper into 1973 reports. Witnesses heard the impact, saw headlights cut and run. One man, Walter Hembry, lived near the old intersection. He suffered insomnia, the report said, and was awake in the window at 2:47. He told police he saw Elodie walking and then saw a sedan barreling away. The report didn't ask why a night watchman at Rook Mercer, the same Walter, was home during his own shift. It didn't ask why he stood at that exact window at that exact minute. Walter died in 1990. He's in Section C. Sometimes his rose lights flutter. Not a run, not a march, just a messy disagreement with the dark. A week ago I handed Klein my notice. I told him I'd found day work at the freight depot. He said, "People don't sleep right after a while out here," and signed the form. Before I go, I wanted to leave more than a logbook of Tuesday dread. Yesterday on my dinner break, I drove to a trophy shop between a vape place and a nail salon and had them etch 6 words on a small brass plate. I set it in the grass beside Elodie's stone, pressed it flat so the mower wouldn't snag it. It reads, "The road remembers you. Walk home." The air in Section H lightened when I stepped back. That sounds like wish thinking, but that's the word my body chose. Light. The pressure eased, as if a room had opened a window. Tonight is Tuesday. It's 2:46. The monitor is a grid of dark squares. I brace for the first flash because habit is stronger than hope. The second hand clicks. 2:47 arrives like a verdict. Nothing happens. No bloom by the shed. No elegant run down the lane. The screen holds steady, empty as a stage after the curtain. I don't breathe loud enough to startle whatever mercy is happening. The radio stays clean. The cart's meter doesn't dip. The office clock ticks, ridiculous with its certainty, and Section H stays quiet. 5 minutes later, I walk the path because belief is a slow learner. The gravel looks like gravel. The air has the ordinary chill of late September with a thin sweetness, as if someone crushed clover in their palm and forgot. There are no wildflowers at the base of the stone. The brass plate throws back a dull glow from my flashlight. The fence hums faintly with highway far beyond, and the cedars do their cedar breathing. It feels over. Or paused. I don't know how to tell the difference when the thing that stops is absence. Later, while I finish my last loop, Section C flickers twice, the Hembry row, and then steadies. I don't go investigate because not every curiosity deserves encouragement. If Walter kept a secret, it isn't waiting for me. People like me want to make rules from what happens once. We want a moral to tack to a bulletin board. Here's what I can say without lying. Sometimes a place holds a shape long after the world redraws its map. A lane turns into a path that turns into a pattern that trips sensors in a graveyard at 2:47 a.m. Sometimes names carry routes like veins. Sometimes acknowledgement is the only tool you get. My last shift is Friday. I'll leave my logbook in the drawer for whoever draws the short straw next. Maybe they'll never see the lamps run that line. Maybe they will, and they'll learn the particular way waiting at 2:46 thins a person. They can decide whether to borrow a thermal imager or a prayer. On my way out at dawn, I stop once more at the back fence. The field beyond is scrub and foxtails and the ghost of Threadneedle Lane as a lighter strip of grass no one mows. I imagine Elodie walking, tired feet, lunch pail, a day's lint stuck to her cuffs. Because imagining is a way of saying a name without sound. Roots are promises, and promises keep walking after the feet that made them stop. Maybe that's all haunting is, a vow that stay. How punctual. Klein will chalk the sensors up to flukes in the thermal sky. The city will call the ribbon-cutting money well spent. Marla will keep tending the microfilm that holds more obituaries than sports scores. Theo will take his kids to a different park on Tuesdays without remembering why. And I'll try to teach my hands not to count seconds at 2:46 when there's no reason to. If the lights stay dark next week, I'll call that peace. If they don't, I'll hope whoever watches learns to read the pattern without stepping into it. Driving home, the first buses hiss past, and a baker unlocks a back door, and a woman in a hoodie crosses the street with a careful, practiced gait that makes me want to pull over and wait until she reaches the other curb. I don't. I drive on because I can't repair every route. But I send a small wish after her feet like a coin into a fountain I don't believe in. Let your path hold. Let your lamps stay dark when you need them to. I didn't plan to become the night heartbeat of a graveyard. It doesn't matter. Some nights the world asks you to stand between a routine and the thing that broke it 50 years ago and say, I see you. Not to fix it, to see it. Tonight, when the clock struck the minute it always used to, the road chose quiet and the lights chose sleep, and a name on rain-colored granite did not have to walk a lane that doesn't exist anymore. That feels like enough to take into daylight. Most people hear graveyard shift and picture teeth in the dark. After 6 months at Bramblegate Memorial, the only thing that bit me was the space heater under my desk. It rattled like a cheap tambourine and gnawed the cold out of my bad knee. March 2022, I was 43, washed out of construction by an ankle that felt stapled together. Night watch paid steady, and steady is a miracle when you and your wife just signed a mortgage on a squat little ranch with shingles like scabs. 10 minutes to the Bramble Gate isn't some endless necropolis. 16 acres if you count the wooded drainage. 2 brick mausoleums like sleepy barges, a run of angel statues with sanded faces, and a slope behind a clutch of maples where the newest stones live in tidy lines. My route was muscle memory by the second week. Sweep the fence for cuts, rattle the maintenance shed door, check the columbarium for kids with warm beer and cold bravado. I knew which wind chime pinged when the breeze leaned east, which raccoon liked tea. The first laugh came on a Wednesday at 2:33 a.m. I remember the minute because my phone gloated at me when the sitcom on my screen cut to silence. I was chewing a cold burrito and pretending jokes recorded in 1998 could defend me from the hour. The other laughter arrived from outside. Thin, bright, the kind that belongs to air and grass. Children. 4, maybe 5 voices, high and breathless, glancing off stone. It came from the west slope where the new markers stood. I thumbed off the sitcom, grabbed the mag light, stepped into night that smelled like damp bark and coin metal. Practical brain first. Trespassers. There's a condo row past the drainage, and the chain link sags if you lean on the right panel. I climbed the slope. The laughter slid, never away precisely. Around. Every 20 steps it rotated to a different shoulder, as if the game were to keep me in the center. Then, like a lid dropping, quiet. Crickets clamped their little instruments shut. No traffic, no wind. My light found a patch of ground that had been busy. Tiny scuffs braided into paths around 6 headstones arranged like chairs. On each stone, dead center, lay one candy wrapper. Not sun-killed trash. Fresh colors. The air had a thread of chocolate in it so sharp my mouth watered. 6 graves, 6 wrappers. The names were strangers. Lark, Jonah, Mira, Teo, Indy, Saffron, cut clean into granite that still gave back sparkles. All 6 shared the same second date. November 9th, 2015. The birth years shrank the world, 7 to 11. I touched a wrapper. Dew kissed the top of my finger. Underneath was dry, faintly warm, like a hand had been there 10 seconds ago. Gate, locked like I left it. Fence, hole, grass, only my boot prints. I collected the wrappers because that part of the job made sense even when nothing else did. Wrote in the log, litter in section M, cleared, and sat with the heater huffing at my ankle while the minute hand dragged toward 3. 2 nights later at exactly 2:33, the laughter found me again. Louder, closer, edged with delighted cruelty the way kids get when the rules of a game are perfect. I was halfway up the slope before my chair stopped spinning. Section M waited like a held breath. The gravel told the story even before my light did. Not random disturbance, but patterns, short looping lanes between stones, the choreography of tag written in rock. The candy lineup had changed. Kit Kat, Butterfinger, Skittles, Payday, Milky Way. Back in the office, I let the glowing rectangle do its bleak little miracles. The story wasn't buried deep. A bus from Hawthorne Elementary, returning from the science wing of the Harbor Museum, didn't make it home. The driver's heart quit. The bus folded into a ditch that pretended to be shallow. 6 students died. The article offered school portraits the way newspapers do, lined like choir members under headlines that look sober even when a person wrote them crying. One paragraph pressed on my lungs. Friday. I quit pretending I wasn't curious and set up behind a gray family monument 30 feet from the circle of stones. The maples combed the wind into a hush. 2:25 tugged the temperature down hard enough to make my teeth feel loose. At 2:33, the air cinched. The game poured out of nowhere. "You're it!" A child's voice popped near the ground. "No tagbacks," caroled another to the left. Footfalls pattered, a sound like handfuls of rice flung at stone. The wrappers lifted and settled, one by one, with neat crinkles. A corner peeled back on a Kit Kat without tearing. My pulse climbed into my throat and grabbed the ladder rungs. "Mr. Alvarez," a girl's voice said, clear enough to make the hair on my arm stand in salute. Friendly, curious. "Are you hiding?" I don't wear a name tag. Only my supervisor, Riggs, and the day groundskeeper, Neve, ever said my surname out here. My skin decided to be all ears. Still, I stood up. There's a rule in me from some other life. Answer when a kid asks. The laughter shut off like someone pressed a button, but breathing stayed. 6 sets, small and definite, made fog puffs in the cold around me. The wrappers unfolded with that careful child politeness adults ruin when they hurry. "We miss lunch," a boy said near my ear. "Miss Ewan let us trade. We can't go to lunch anymore." Footprints introduced themselves at my boots. No smoke, no Shah, Immer. Just the frank logic of weight on damp gravel. Child-sized treads, 3 or 4 if I'm any judge, led base to base in lines that made perfect sense to memory. Safety here, safety there, run like you mean it. I picked up a Reese's wrapper and turned the edge to the light. The expiration date said 11/2015. The plastic was warm. 6 handprints pressed into a darker patch behind me while I looked. Narrow palms splayed like someone had just steadied themselves. On one stone, a smooth river pebble pinned a corner of notebook paper. I slid it free. 3 holes, pencil cursive with careful loops and the kind of earnestness school supplies are good at. "We just want a friend to play with." I carried the note like a live coal back to the office and propped it by the sugar packets. The heater wheezed, the second hand made its plodding pilgrimage, and the world refused to pick a lane between ordinary and not. The next morning I drove to Hawthorne Elementary because restraint had left town. The front office wore an optimistic blue, and the secretary had the posture of someone who knew where every tissue box lived. I asked for Ms. Yuen. "Retired," she said, a word that tries to be gentle and isn't. She wrote an address on a sticky note and pressed it to my palm like a secret. Her house was a little green square with sunflowers in custody of the yard. A kid on a scooter streaked past and a dog performed a complicated dance with a leash and a teenager. The woman who opened the door had silver in her hair and a smile that admitted the weather inside her was changeable. "You're here about my kids," she said, and, "Come in before the tea gets shy." Her living room was a soft museum, crayon galaxies, traced hand turkeys, a papier-mâché volcano with a missing tooth. She showed me a composition book whose spine had been polished by thumbs. Inside were lists with hearts and arrows, favorites, allergies, trade rules. The handwriting was steady, hopeful. Lark. Peanut butter cups, never trades, promise. Jonah, strawberry anything. Mira, caramel, real kind. Teo, blue candies only, circled twice. Indy, plain chocolate, bites the letters in order, saffron. Skittles, purple first. I told her about Section M, about wrappers and breath puffs, about the note signed S. She didn't dismiss me, didn't sanctify it either. She listened like a teacher at a reading circle. "You aren't the first," she said finally. "Parents have found candy on those stones they didn't bring. Once a mother found a hair clip she thought the river ate. The first year after," the word snagged. "Some of the kids who survived snuck out and sat there at night in a circle, whispering and trading. They said they're fry. The 24-hour market at 11:30 p.m. feels like a hospital for candy." I stood under humming lights and matched wrappers to a list in my head. 6 single serves exactly. Wrappers mattered more than sugar. At 2:15 I climbed the hill, placed one dead center on each stone, and whispered names because it felt rude not to. I sat cross-legged in the middle and let my ankle lodge its complaint. At 2:33, cold pulled a neat blanket over the slope. The wrappers opened one by one, tidy as a chore done right. "Thank you." When I stood, 6 small objects waited in a straight soldier's row where my shins had been. The purple hairband, the baseball card, a pencil chewed to a hexagon, a sun-faded friendship bracelet, a plastic dinosaur with a glued tail, and a folded square of notebook paper wearing a gold star sticker, a little crooked. "You're good at sitting still. That means you're good at games." S. I took the gifts. A trade is a contract, especially with kids. At home, a shoebox on the closet shelf became their address. I didn't tell Ren at first. Some things you say out loud only after they've decided to stay true on their own. After that, 2:33 belonged to someone else. Some nights the hill wore footsteps and laughter. Some nights it wore only the tidy peel of wrappers and the hover of breath. No photographs. Lenses make things pose. The realness here dislikes that. When Neve retired, Riggs moved me to days. The raise stapled our mortgage into place with less wobble. Night shifts went to a rotation of new guards. 2 quit inside a week without articulating why. Riggs cornered me near the mower shed. "Couple of the kids are saying they hear, well, kids," he said, attempting a smirk. "You pick up anything like that when you were nights?" "Sound carries from the condos," I said, which is true and not. He studied me like a man thinking about ladders, then decided not to climb. The guard who lasted was a quiet 20-something named Zeke. After his first month, he parked his mower and looked at the steering wheel like it had opinions. "The one's an M," he said without looking up. "Am I supposed to do something?" I handed him a brown bag with 6 bars, and the only instruction I trust. Place one on each stone if you hear them. Sit if you can. Don't try to catch anything. It isn't that kind of game. He nodded, the nod of someone receiving rules that feel older than the fence line. Word doesn't need the internet to travel here. By October, Section M looked like a corner of a playground when kids forget to gather every treasure. Families left candy. Some left the bargain bag kind with more air than chocolate. Some left the good stuff. All of it looked like love trying out different wrappers. Around Halloween, the stones bloomed with treats the way other graves bloom with chrysanthemums. I've seen parents of the survivors sit in circles and trade stories like they're practicing an old. Last November 9th, I walked my lunch to the hill and found Ms. Ewan there with a reusable bag of candy tucked in her elbow like a bouquet. More silver threaded her hair. She set one candy per stone, slow and equal. "They were good kids," she said when she saw me, and then, with a small correction that felt like a blessing, "They are." We stood without explaining it to each other. The hill didn't feel haunted. It felt paused. A recess the bell forgot to end. People ask if I'm scared, as if fear were a knob I can set to 0. I'm scared of other things. Thin months, ice on steps, the heater dying in January. Up there, the only fear is the useful kind, that forgetting is easy, that names are lighter than they deserve, that games end if nobody brings the pieces. That fear sends me to the market on my way in. When I train new guards now, I show them practicals. The fence panel that slumps after thaw, the maintenance lock that sulks in cold, how to lean a shoulder into the shed door so it forgives you. Then I tell them, like weather, some nights at 2:33 the hill wants company. You don't have to understand it, just be polite. I do not say haunted. Haunted is for things that want to make you smaller. Section M makes me feel like a person whose main job is to respond. If you go, quietly, please, you'll see what I mean. 6 stones form a circle if you look slant. Little braided tracks wander the gravel. Maps none of us will rake away. Wrappers sit tidily as if a wind with manners placed them. You might hear nothing. You might hear negotiations about a peanut butter cup that would embarrass Wall Street. You might feel cold settle on your shoulder the way a hand does when it's asking to be noticed. If you hear laughter, say names. Names don't control anything. They acknowledge. Lark, Jonah, Mira, Teo, Indy, Saffron. Or say the names you carry from your own life and let the air decide how introductions work. Don't expect a miracle. Expect a trade. Candy for a hairband, patience for the sound of running feet, attention for the idea that some bells are written in chalk that rain refuses. Back in the office, nothing changes in ways you can inventory. Coffee tastes like a mistake someone keeps insisting isn't one. The vending machine steals $1 with theatrical innocence. Riggs signs timesheets with a flourish like he's launching a ship. But a seam runs through my days now that wasn't there before. At 2:33, whether I'm measuring fuel for mowers or lining up invoices, I listen. Sometimes the hour passes blank. Sometimes I swear I hear rappers inhale. At home, the shoebox on the closet shelf has become its own small church. On some mornings when sleep is a stubborn door, I lift the lid and line the gifts in a row. Hairband, card, pencil, bracelet, dinosaur, gold star note. Ren calls me a soft man and kisses my jaw like it's a compliment. I tell her I always was. The world just finally gave me a job where softness is a credential. I think about bells too much for a man who doesn't attend church. Schools decide childhood with bells. Start, stop, line up, go home. Somewhere between a museum gift shop and a ditch pretending it couldn't hurt anyone, 6 schedules broke. The bell that should have rung never did. Maybe what exists on that slope is a game without a last call. Maybe it's grief making a shelter. Maybe it's what happens when love refuses to move out. Explanations don't help me do my part. The rules I can keep in my pockets are simple. Bring what they loved in the way they loved it. Sit still, listen for breath, accept trades. Teach the new kid the rules. Don't rake the paths. Remember, I can do those with a bad ankle and a space heater chewing at my bones. So on mornings when the sky is a bruise deciding whether to heal, to chain into my palm and say the sentence that never breaks. I learned it from Ms. Ewan because it belongs to anyone who needs it. They're good kids, I tell the air that knows my name. Still are. Then I go count mowers, argue with the soda machine, initial the log, and carry my second job inside my first, caretaker of a recess that happens at 2:33. Where 6 children still prefer fair trades. Wrappers open neatly, and laughter knows the paths between stones better than any living feet ever could. July 2016 came on like a fever over Saguaro Ridge, the kind of heat that makes asphalt breathe and porch rails hiss when rain thinks about falling. Our town was a long blink between two districts, famous only for a chili cook-off and a mural nobody bothered to finish. I was 17, unlicensed by choice, and allergic to my family's swamp cooler. So I stayed most days at my best friend's place, where the vents hummed and the cold air felt like a lie we agreed to. His name was Kieran. He had wildfire hair that refused to obey gravity, freckles like constellations no one had mapped, and a grin that suggested every bad idea came with a money-back guarantee. We met in 7th grade detention and never bothered to leave. Kieran's parents kept their small stucco house at 68 degrees all summer. Mine sounded like a hot aquarium. So we lay on his basement rug, scrolling until our thumbs learned boredom by heart. That Thursday, the sky looked hammered flat and the dark took forever to arrive. Kieran made a little click with his tongue. He sat up and shoved his phone at me. "Look," he said, "night crawlers found something." It was an urban exploration forum filled with people who made tetanus a lifestyle, photographers and trespass poets. The thread was about a cemetery on the edge of town. Laurel Hollow Memorial, a spill of markers in the pecan flats beyond the old highway. The photos were clean and mean. Angels with sand-worn faces, rusted fences, a small temple of a mausoleum with busted stained glass. And off to one side, taller than anything around it, a Victorian monster of a building that once had been a funeral home. Laurel Hollow still took burials for families who already owned plots. The mortuary had lost its license after the owner's money tricks went public. Nobody in town cared enough to argue with history. We just let it rot. "Tonight," Kieran said, "ID." His eyes had the brightness they got when a plan was writing itself behind them. I said yes, the way people accept dares they don't want to own. We arranged the oldest lie. He was at my house. I was at his. Our parents believed in our good sense the way gardeners believe in rain. At 11:45, I slid out my window with a backpack and cut across lots to Kieran's street. He waited at the curb with his dad's metal flashlight and a bag that clinked with snacks and water like we were going to a movie. We took the highway shoulder out of town. Once we passed the last cul-de-sac, the night turned real. No streetlights, only stars snagged on wires and the white noise of crickets. The heat fell to something human. Kieran talked to fill space, flipping topics like channels, his sister's boyfriend, and his illegal exhaust, a game he wanted when it went on sale, whether Mrs. Hahn would let him redo the lab he'd flooded. When the ironwork gates of Laurel Hollow loomed, his voice thinned to a whisper and then dropped out. The main entrance had a heavy chain and a "Respect the Dead" sign. The fence along the service road was old, decorative, and trusting. We found a low spot, climbed between the spears, and landed in a hush that felt like a room closing. Gravel shifted under us as we took the central path. The place was larger than it looked from the highway, more crowded, more alive. Some plots trimmed and loved, others surrendered to wildflowers and knee-high weeds. Kieran took pictures with flash. Names flickered to life and sank. Dates from a century ago. A marble lamb missing an ear. We walked with care, because walking with care was the only defense we had. When we saw the Laurelist up close, I felt every childish story I'd been told rearrange into a threat. 3 floors of peeling white, a wraparound porch on a bad angle, boarded windows like closed eyes, 2 panes at ground, level were broken, glittering teeth in the beam of Kieran's light. The smell leaking from the doorway made my nose twitch, damp, rot, and an old chemical ice that felt like memory. The side door. Kieran breathed. The door was hinged by habit alone, open just enough to count as invitation. We stood in the weeds, listening to our own breath, deciding if bravery and idiocy were just different hats. Crunching on gravel came from behind the building, not sneaking, not running, A man walked like he knew the exact number of steps. We folded down behind a tall obelisk. I felt Kieran's hand clamp my shoulder and press. The man moved through the graveyard without light. He wore work clothes dark enough to drink the night, hair gray and ragged at his shoulders, a beard combed by wind alone. He carried a camping lantern but didn't flick it on. He didn't trip. He didn't slow. He glided to the side door and slid in as if keys had opened it. We counted a long minute with our teeth clenched. Then a warm pain lit on the second floor. The lantern, alive at last. The glow jittered across a ceiling and steadied into a square of orange. Curiosity hooked us. We drifted closer, keeping to the shadows of monuments, until a broken window gave us a low mouthful of inside air. We killed our light and listened. A board creaked overhead. Something dragged, heavy against wood. Then a voice, young, not child, not adult. My age, maybe. The words were smothered by drywall and distance, but you could hear the shape of them. A plea bent to keep from breaking. An older voice answered, power wrapped in quiet. I told you to stay in the room, it said. You move when I say. You wanted to know how things were. I'm showing you. Another shuffle. The orange square danced, then snapped still. Somewhere above us, a door hit its frame. The sound traveled through the building's skeleton and into ours. We ran. Not a movie run, not heroic. Arms pumping wrong, breath hacking, shoes swallowing gravel. We squeezed back through the fence and didn't stop until the highway shoulder took us in and the empty lanes glowed. We call, Kieran said, gulping air. We call right now. With what? I said. We admit we were trespassing so we can say we heard bad vibes? Joking is what I do when the edges of the world go white. He stared at me like I was a stranger he didn't like much. We walked back in a silence so thick it felt like cotton in the throat. His porch light made the street look like a stage. We sat on the steps and waited for our pulse to report honest numbers. No plan came. Sleep didn't, either. At noon the next day, Kieran's text said only, now. He had his laptop open to the county news site. The headline hit like a cold drink poured inside your chest. Sheriff searching for missing student. Last seen near Saguaro Ridge. 19-year-old Min Lei, a sophomore at the state university, had told his roommate he was going to photograph abandoned structures for a class. 3 days missing. Photo, a kid with a hoodie and a bright mouth, arm thrown around friends like a bridge that would never fall. Kieran had already opened a mess of tabs. A community group post, 6 months old, from a woman named Alondra Vega. Furious words about a man who approached her son at the skate park, selling a private tour of Laurel Hollow and the Laurelist. History you could feel. She'd attached a doorbell cam still. Gray hair to the shoulders, beard to the chest, eyes like a dead flashlight. That's him, Kieran said. He didn't need my nod. More posts. At least 7 different warnings over the past year. A man with that same outline haunting the places where teenagers gathered. The skate park, the mall lot, the diner that never closed. He spoke like a docent laying out a map. He used the pitch he'd honed, real history, the kind the public didn't get after dark for proper mood. One father, Hector Ruiz, had filed a report after the man tried the story on his daughter at the gas station. Since he never touched her, the report became paper that warmed a desk. The man left a name, R. Malvern. Said he was writing a book about small-town funeral practices. Hector searched and found a Raymond Malvern convicted in 2003 in another state for kidnapping and unlawful restraint. The mugshot was old and mean. Time changes faces like clay, but the bones rhyme. We kept digging. An archived article from 2015 said the mortuary had been breached multiple times. The sheriff had promised seals and fines. People in comment threads argued about orange glows at night, whether teenagers or ghosts carried the light. 3 days, Kieran said, staring at Min's picture. His voice thinned to a wire. He could be in there right now. He reached for his phone and I let him. He dialed. He gave the dispatcher the midnight version. We were driving past and saw a light in a building that should be dead. We heard voices upstairs, one angry. He didn't give names. He gave his real number and a fake first name that would make him jump at blocked calls for a month. The dispatcher asked the right questions and didn't ask the ones that would make us lie worse. She said a unit would check it out. We spent the afternoon refreshing pages and making bargains with air. At 6 p.m., the sheriff's page posted a notice. Police activity at Laurel Hollow. An hour later, a banner lit up the site, and my throat stung. Missing student found alive, suspect in custody. Details were swallowed for the night. Morning unpacked them. The man's name was Raymond Malvern, 62, a drifter with an archive of false starts. He'd been living under the Laurelist for months, in the cool of the basement where the rooms had concrete floors and drains and hooks for hose. He'd run a generator for a Strin. G of lights filled a corner with canned food and hung clipboards like trophies. He lured kids with a tour guide's patter and an invitation to experience authentic ritual spaces. Min had been held in an embalming room. Malvern moved him between rooms as he instructed, showing instruments that belonged in glass cases, making him lie and display coffins, talking in low sermons about dignity and the old ways and what it means to face mortality. The police didn't release everything. A few decisions belonged to the private ledger, but the skeleton of it stood up and walked. Over the next week, more came out. Teens who had stepped into the building and then stepped back out when Malvern's tone turned from excitement to ownership. A girl who had run when he said the phrase, full immersion. The prosecutor called it teaching through captivity, and I saw the phrase land in people's mouths and rot there. We didn't tell anyone we had been there. We didn't perform our role as witnesses. The guilt was a small animal that lived in my chest and scratched when the house got quiet. I told myself this. Our call trimmed hours off a calendar that could have held weeks. The police said as much, in careful words, when the press conference hit. Tipsters noticed lights and activity. They didn't say two dumb kids. They said citizens. I tried the word on and hoped it fit. The court gave Malvern 25 years. Comments said it wasn't enough. I didn't disagree. The county demolished the Laurelist a year later. A chain-link fence went up first, then excavators, then a sky where a roof had been. The first time I drove past and saw absence, I felt air loosen in my chest like a knot cut. Sometimes I take the long way home and pass Laurel Hollow's gates. The markers hold sunlight and shadow in equal measure. The pecans drop their green grenades in September, and the crows gossip about it, like critics. I look for nothing and find it and breathe. Kieran and I don't explore anymore. Curiosity still lives in us. We just keep it on a shorter leash. When we talk about that night, we perform the joke we invented to keep the dark from thinking it won. He says my legs proved ghosts are interval trainers. I tell him his flashlight beam had stage fright. We laugh, but our eyes go farther than the joke and then come back. People ask whether I believe in ghosts. I say I believe in rooms that remember voices. I believe in places that keep a temperature past sunset. I believe in the way a stranger's certainty can make a hallway feel like a trap. And I believe in two kids with wrong shoes at the wrong hour who ran instead of playing brave, then dialed a number and changed the math of a night. Min transferred to a different campus where the ocean makes its own weather. Someone said he declared social work, that he wanted to be the person who shows up when doors thud and lungs forget to work. I hope so. I hope he makes a life that argues with what happened and wins every day in small ways. As for me, the haunt that stayed is a useful one. It makes me pull over for a kid with a dead car on a dead road. It makes me check the back seat before I climb in, not because I'm scared of what will appear, but because respect is a habit. It makes me suspicious of any invitation that requires darkness to sell its history. On the hottest nights, when the asphalt breathes and the cicadas stitch their electric fence across the orchards, I think of the square of orange light in a second-story window that doesn't exist anymore. I think of a voice younger than mine learning the outline of fear. I think of the sound a door makes when it closes over a lesson nobody asked to take. And I am grateful for the ugly truth we learned. Sometimes the only brave act available is picking up the phone. After the trial, a pocket park replaced the Lorelei. ST's slab. The city installed a bench and a bronze plaque that says healing in a font that pretends it knows how. At noon, the metal brands your palm. The pecan shade stops shy, as if the tree refuses ground that used to breathe cold. I pulled over once and watched moths orbit the solar lamp. A couple brought flowers but didn't cross the chain. They set the bouquet on gravel and left. A stray dog nosed it, then trotted on. Nights when the heat won't quit, I dream of Laurel Hollow. The stones tilt and listen as I pass. I hear boots on floorboards and a voice practicing bravery. I try to move and can't at first. Then I remember I'm older than the dream, and the body catches up. I wake with my hand on the wall, checking for breathing. All I feel is the house's pulse, ductwork settling, a truck coughing 3 doors down, a clock keeping time it did not earn. That's the lesson the nightmare leaves. Trust the ordinary until it isn't. Doors thudding should mean wind. Lantern light should mean camping. A stranger's lecture should mean nothing. When those things mean more, you do the unspectacular act. You pick up the phone. You make the call. You let the night bend because you bothered to speak. I kept the grounds at Sagehollow National Cemetery, an exposed mesa about 45 miles outside Santa Fe, for 15 years. Most days were so quiet they had a sound of their own. Weed eaters whining, sprinklers ticking, the hum of a mower drifting up and down the rows. 11,000 markers spread over 88 acres, white tablets aligned as if the wind itself stood at attention. I knew the place like a map I'd worn thin with my thumbs, especially Section Foxtrot, the newer burials from Iraq and Afghanistan. It was my job to make grief look orderly, straight edges, clean stone, grass that never grew wild. People thanked me for the neatness. I like to believe it helped. Early October is when everything changed. The rabbit brush along the fence had gone the color of toast, and the sky felt near enough to touch. Lydia McCall arrived, like she always did on Sundays, at 10 sharp with a plastic-wrapped bouquet of white carnations for her boy, Private First Class Arlo McCall. He died in the Kunar Valley in 2012. Lydia always brought a folding chair, sat exactly an hour, and talked to the stone as if it could reach back. That morning she ran to the maintenance bay where I was hosing clay off a mower, words clattering out of her. "They tore them," she said. "Somebody tore them." We went to Foxtrot together. The carnations on Arlo's grave looked like they'd been fed through a chipper, stems kinked and fraying, petals strewn like confetti after a parade no one had enjoyed. A bouquet 2 feet away, fat red tulips, sat untouched, smug in their perfect posture. I told her I'd keep watch. I wanted to believe some bored teenager had chased a dare across sacred ground. A week later, the Calderons drove in from Provo with yellow roses for their son, Corporal Rylan Calderon. They found nothing but pulp pressed into the sod, yellow smears in the blades like the lawn had been crying. Everything around their boy's plot sat as if staged for a brochure. My supervisor, Rick Hollis, told me to document. "If it's vandalism, we'll nail it," he said, rubbing his temple as if a headache were a thought trying to get out. I started a log, took photos, and we set 2 no-glow trail cams on T-posts facing the problem plots. The cameras stared all weekend. On playback, the frames skipped from whole bouquets to torn husks with no bodies in between. No trespassers, no animals, not even a drifting shadow thick enough to blame. The destruction was too precise for wind. The petals were shredded into neat, mean little pieces, like a machine that hated softness. Patterns bother me until I find them. That night I sat in the office with the database open, cross-checking the names from my log. The markers didn't list cause of death, but I'd listened to families for years. Every grave touched by the tearing belonged to someone lost to friendly fire. Arlo's convoy misidentified a patrol. Ryland's position was swallowed by a drone meant for the next valley. I read until the screen turned my face the color of skim milk. I didn't tell Rick. Saying it out loud felt like giving the idea a key to our door. Instead, I set a test on Monday morning. I bought daisies from the supermarket, placed them on Sergeant Eli Novak's grave, a 2009 friendly fire death, and parked 50 yards away with a clipboard and a thermos. The sun rose into a pale blue bowl. A hawk wrote its slow cursive over Foxtrot. The irrigation hissed in another section. I looked away for 20 minutes to fix a broken riser. When I came back, the daisies had become dust, white and yellow freckles in the grass. The plastic wreath on the neighbor's stone hadn't even collected a cobweb. On Wednesday, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair pulled in, and I recognized him, Mason Whitaker. He'd been Arlo's squad leader, the one who read off a grid that belonged to the wrong stretch of earth. I remembered his face from the memorial years back, fists clenched like he was trying to hold a door closed from the wrong side. He carried an extravagant arrangement, white lilies caged by purple irises in a brass cup, and knelt at Arlo's stone for 10 silent minutes. After he left, I watched from the tool shed. 15 minutes later, the bouquet detonated into petals so fine I found flecks of violet on stones 20 feet away, as if a hand I couldn't see had flung them with spite. It felt personal, and it wasn't personal to me. That was the worst part. That night I told Rick everything. The notes, the list, the thread I'd pulled that kept revealing more thread. He went pale in a way that made his scalp shine. "I hate that this makes sense," he said. We agreed to call a few families quietly, starting with Lydia. She listened without interrupting, and then told me Arlo had written to her in the weeks before he died. He'd described an Allied outpost hit by mistake, how the air afterward felt charged like static you couldn't discharge. "We're all looking sideways," he wrote. "I'm scared of the boots on both sides." She still had the emails. She didn't need to read them to me for me to believe her. 2 days later, a retired colonel showed up, Pierce Larrabee, crisp as inspection day. His unit had lost 3 men to a single disastrous call in 2011. He brought 3 identical bouquets of red poppies, saluted at each stone, lips moving with words I couldn't hear, and placed the bouquets with the care of a man folding a flag. 10 minutes after he left, I walked the row. 2 of the poppy bunches had been chewed to rags, red scattered on green like drops of lacquer. The third, at Parati, Evad Theo Yoon's marker, was still perfect. It bothered me until I checked our internal notes and remembered, 8 weeks earlier, Theo's family had his body moved to a private cemetery in Oregon. The name remained. The person had left. Rick called in a favor with his brother, who worked too close to the places that stamp secrets. On Sunday, we locked the office and read pages we weren't supposed to see. Every friendly fire case tied to our shredded bouquet list had ended the same way. Procedural haze, equipment anomaly, no disciplinary action recommended. A different set of graves, also friendly fire, sat calm. In those, someone had been court-martialed or at least stripped of a command. The cemetery, it seemed, knew which stories had been left unfinished. Rick suggested bringing in a chaplain to bless Foxtrot, water and prayer and a press release. I shook my head. "This isn't about holiness," I said. "It's about promises that never got answered." The next morning, I turned onto the access road and saw Mason's truck idling by Foxtrot. He stood with a fresh bouquet, a bottle of rye, and the bulge of a pistol at his back. I phoned Rick and walked across the grass with my hands visible. Mason swayed, eyes red. He whispered that he'd tried to abort the strike, that the radio died, that the grid still wakes him up. He set the flowers down like he was tucking in a child and drew the gun. For a breath, I thought he'd turn it on himself. Instead, he pointed it at the stone and begged Arlo to forgive him. The bouquet burst, petals lifting and slapping his face as if the air had decided to throw hands. The gun fell into the grass. He buckled to his knees and sobbed while white fragments swirled in wind that wasn't blowing. Deputies took him for evaluation. Rick filed a report that didn't try to describe what paper won't accept. Privately, we changed policy. We stopped replacing flowers on those specific graves and suggested coins or small flags instead. Challenge coins seemed to stay put. Soft things went violent. Metal stayed steady. Most families adapted. Lydia still brings carnations but holds them while she talks, then takes them home. 2 weeks after the change, the tearing stopped. The cameras recorded nothing but grass growing and shadows shifting like old men. The hill felt calmer, though calm isn't always a kindness. I fell back into the rhythm I trust, edgers and oil changes, little engines coughing awake, the clean stripe a mower leaves behind. I still kept my eye on Foxtrot. I trimmed around the engraved rank insignias with a care I've never given to my own handwriting. I stacked trimmer spools in clear tubs like pale halos and wiped hard water stains off the fountains until you could see your nose in them. Visitors thanked me. They said the place felt peaceful. I know which mornings to walk slower alone. I nodded and let them believe it, because what I know is that peace is a look you give a landscape, not a thing the ground owes you. If you stand long enough between the rows that belong to friendly fire, you notice a hush that isn't quite silence. Shoe soles quiet themselves. Birds arc wide. The air feels unstitched, like a seam waiting for the needle. The day I realized the exhumed grave was spared, I started wondering whether presence matters more than stone. Maybe it's the person refusing softness. Maybe it's the story anchored to the name that keeps the earth unsettled. I don't claim answers, but I can tell you the tearing only ever found the cases where no one had carried the blame in daylight. It was as if the cemetery kept a ledger nobody else would balance until a coin marked service or a flag meant duty met duty, and the account paused. New hires ask whether I believe in ghosts. I tell them you don't need belief for something to work on you. You only need to stand where a rule broke. Justice is a rule, so is grief. When one fails, the other speaks strangely. I keep Foxtrot at a regulation 3 inches. I keep the blades sharp. I log what needs logging and don't pretend I understand the rest. Some deaths hit twice. Once with heat and noise, and again when the paperwork shrugs. The second strike echoes in tears' soft offerings like a current tugging at anything that floats. Maybe the petals knew what the files tried to bury. Maybe what's unsettled claws at kindness until someone says the missing words and signs a name. If you come to Sagehollow to see someone in Foxtrot, bring a coin. Rub the embossing and remember promises have weight. Speak the story the way it deserves. Hold your flowers while you talk, then take them home. If one day you set down a bouquet and it stays, bright, unshredded, take it as a sign a weight finally moved. Until then, I'll be here with my mower and my notebook, listening for that thin change in the air that means the ledger is open and a hand I can't see is counting. In second year at Bellwether College, I built a photo series that ended my love of cemeteries. I majored in visual arts, happier adjusting settings than making small talk. Our professor, Dr. Yoon, gave us freedom. Pick a place and bring back proof. While the others chased neon or alleys, I chose an old burial ground. I liked the order and the silence, a room with good acoustics. The cemetery sat above a fishing town called Harrow Cove, Maine. No iron fencing, just a low granite wall and a latch that stuck on foggy days and nights. Birches leaned over the slope as if rain had taught them to bow. Between them, slate headstones listed like loose teeth. A brick crypt sagged in the center with a plaque the sea had turned green. The sky was ash and the wind kept the grass moving, which makes a place seem awake even when it's about the dead. I took the bus with a tripod, 2 lenses, spare batteries taped together, and a thermos of coffee that always tasted like pennies. No one else got off with me. The gulls quieted as if an audience had settled. I stepped over the wall and set up near a row of stones carved with willow fronds. Once the shutter started, I forgot myself. Click, pause, click. Little doors swinging, light measured into bits I could hold. For a long stretch, there was only geometry. I crouched to catch pitted names, stood to line rows, dialed exposure the way you rub sleep from your eyes. The first batch looked right on the tiny screen. Crisp edges, soft light, a flat horizon that made the place feel like a thought. Then my thumb hit a frame where something thin and vertical haunted the far left. I zoomed. A person stood beneath a birch, too upright to be a trick. The face was swallowed by shade. The outline was neat, deliberate, like a cutout. I lifted my head to wave an apology for stealing someone's quiet. Under the birch there was no one. Leaves moved. Why cut? And went on. I decided the sensor had made a shape out of noise and kept working because work can bully fear into a corner for a while. I changed lenses and climbed higher for a wide shot that took in the crypt, the wall, a smear of ocean. I made 3 frames. In the second set, the figure had shifted. Not a lot, just enough to kill coincidence. Now he stood beside a cracked obelisk, body tilted a degree toward the lens. The posture was identical from frame to frame, as if he had not moved but simply been placed. I hadn't heard feet on wet grass. I hadn't felt the social static that warns you someone's close. Hello, I called because rules say you greet strangers. The wind carried my voice away. Stubbornness kept me there. I went to the crypt. Bryony, the letters timid. I shot in rings. The tight frame brought him back. Edge of image, coat too heavy for the weather, collar carving a jaw I could not resolve. The camera knew someone my eyes didn't. I didn't call out again. I packed without neatness, tripod legs clacking like bones. Walking instead of running felt crucial, as if noise might count as permission. At the wall, my heels slipped and I scraped my palms. The derelict lighthouse above the bluff stared with its rusted catwalk. I reached the car, locked it before turning the key, and drove with the rear view trying to become a mirror of every fear I had stored. Back in the dorm, my roommate Mira had left a note about studio hours and a dying plant. I put the card in my laptop because pretending I hadn't seen anything would make me worse. Thumbnails tiled like tiny gravestones. I opened them in order, like a flip book. There he was again, distant, then nearer still, always a little more present than before. My nose tingled the way it does right before a nosebleed. I kept going. Up close, the coat absorbed light. Rain color, not black. Magnified, the fabric showed a faint grid, fingerprint-like. The second to last frame set him half in the shot, head cocked as if listening. The last was nearly all coat and collar. No face, only the idea of one. The room tightened around the screen. My laptop fan whined as if it wanted to leave. I waited for a slam of a door or someone's music to recalibrate the world. Nothing came. I dragged the folder to trash, emptied it, formatted the card for good measure. It felt like dousing a match you hadn't lit. For a long time I sat with the card in my hand, trying to decide what it meant to delete evidence of something you didn't understand. I didn't go back to Harrow Cove. I finished my series on rooftops in an abandoned pool whose paint shed like fish scales. Dr. Yoon wrote, "Good restraint" in the margins, which is what teachers say when you bring them a story they can't grade. When anyone on campus wore a coat with a raised collar, I adjusted my route. I didn't tell Mira because saying it out loud felt like inviting a guest you couldn't ask to leave. At 3 a.m, insomnia made me practical. I searched the cemetery online to put dates on the fear. The chapel had burned after a lightning strike. 2 stonecutters had died in a wall collapse during repairs. Comments about a groundskeeper who disliked visitors repeated in identical language across sites, as if everyone was parodying the same warning. None of it explained how a figure could be present only in hindsight. Time went on. I passed my critique. I worked nights at the print shop. Finally, I slept. But sometimes I woke with the sharp belief that I'd heard a shudder, that quick leather strap sound. It was only the radiator ticking or a door down the hall catching. Still, each time I saw the last photo in my head, the fabric smothering the frame, the collar cutting a line across it like a control. The mind is a dark room. It develops what you feed it. Once, a first-year named Kaito emailed a contact sheet of an abandoned theater. In one window, the negative space held the suggestion of a person. He wrote, "Is this a good accident?" I answered, "It's an accident. Reshoot." My fingers shook as I typed. I wanted to say, "Don't invite strangers who arrive only after you look away. Don't let your camera open doors you can't close." But teachers talk about exposure and line, not doors. I don't have a clean ending. Maybe there was a man who wanted to be seen without being present. Maybe the sensor shaped noise into a body and I fed it meaning. Or maybe the lens was a hinge, the shutter a door, and something patient stepped closer each time. I deleted everything and never returned. Still, some nights I dream the last image recedes a fraction, opening a sliver of space for a face, and I wake before it appears.